Aloha and welcome to Maui Mana'o. I'm your host, Alan Teixeira, and thank you for joining us on this second episode of the 2014 legislative session. Joining us again is the Maui Senate delegation, Senator Kalani English, Senator Rosalyn Baker, and Senator Gilbert Keith-Agaran. Thank you, Senators, for joining us today. Well, this session is moving very quickly, and we've reached the conference portion. Can you please describe the legislative process for us and what conference means? Anyone?
Well, conference is when we try to resolve the differences between the House version of Senate bills and the Senate version of House bills. So we have staked out our position, and the conference committee would be composed of the chair of the subject matter committee that had jurisdiction over that particular bill, and then other members of the committee, if it went on to Ways and Means or to Consumer Protection or to Judiciary, then those the chair or the designee for that particular committee is on the conference committee as well. So it's a much smaller committee. Typically, I think the Senate, unless they're very controversial bills, will take between 3 and 5 members. The difference is the budget conference, which is all the members of Ways and Means and all the members of Finance.
And the one thing to realize about conference is that it's now a discussion between the House and the Senate. So we don't take testimony. And what we're doing is comparing let's say it's a Senate bill. We have the Senate position and the House position, and we compare those. So it's us sitting with our counterparts, trying to work out the differences in language. And sometimes we get down to, is it a comma, is it a period, is it a capital? And sometimes that's the only difference. Other times, huge fundamental differences that we have to find compromises on. If we cannot find a compromise, the bill will die.
Because the bill has to be in the exact same format that both bodies will pass finally before it can go to the governor. So every comma, every period, every space, all the words have to be the same.
Now, because we've reduced the number of bills that are being considered in conference, occasionally there are going to be some bills that are very important for Maui County. So we will occasionally try to make sure that one of us is on those particular conferences. And we're lucky that Senator Baker chairs the Consumer Protection Committee and that Senator English chairs the Transportation Committee, because some of those major issues for Maui County involve issues within their control. There are bills that we introduced or are interested in that are still floating out there, and we can make a request to be on the committee as well. And I think there are a couple of bills that we may want to do that on.
And with both Senator English and Senator Keith-Agaran on the Ways and Means Committee, it means that we can make sure that we've got coverage for particularly those Maui bills are important bills to Maui County that have financial implications.
And maybe it's a good time to explain our reservation votes. Because what people don't understand is that if you vote no on a bill, you take yourself off the chance of being on the conference. So a lot of times you'll see senators stand up and say, I don't like this, this particular issue, but I'll vote with reservations, yes with reservations, because they want to be in the conference. And that's where they can really, make their point, push to get the changes that they want. So, a lot of times we get calls from people saying, we don't understand what reservations means. It's trying to preserve your position till the end game.
Or sometimes you're not really certain where this bill's going, or maybe it's missing some key information, and so rather than commit to being in favor of it, but you want to keep the dialogue going, you can vote with reservations.
Excellent. Could we move on to another topic? Each year, numerous organizations apply for the legislature's grants and aid program. This is a subject we never really touched on before, but can you discuss the GIA process and some of the organizations applying?
Well, okay, I guess it's a little tough question. We have a state budget. The state budget usually funds departments and agencies of the government, but we also have some money that will fund community organizations, mainly nonprofits, and that's the grant and aid process. And every year, we probably get more applications asking for more money than really is available. I think people are a little optimistic this year, given the fact that we were showing a projected revenue surplus. And so I understand we got about over 200 applications,
wow.
Both for capital improvement project grants and aids, as well as operating grants and aids. And we can talk about some of the Maui organizations doing important work that are applying for both operating and capital improvement grants and aids.
So basically, can anyone apply for a grant and aid?
You have to be a nonprofit organization. You have to be a Hawaii-based organization. And you really have to do your due diligence as to, typically the legislature likes to look at programs that, if it's a capital expense, a construction expense, we're sort of the contributor of last position, so that we know that the project is actually going to get funded and we're just helping them finish it off. If it's a program GIA, although there are some exceptions to this, we try to do it so that it's not just paying for a startup, but it's helping an existing program that's proven itself expand, go to new areas, or keep up with the cost of living sometimes for some of these programs. And the Senate this year just put in its budget some of the capital improvement GIAs, and unfortunately, because our budget surplus, so-called surplus, has disappeared, I'm expecting that it's going to be a much tougher time for programmatic GIAs to be funded at the end, but those will be the last things that the budget conference will agree on.
Right, and that's something key to understand, is that, a lot of people say we don't see it in the budget, but it's the last thing that we consider. And it has to be that way because we have to fund government, we have to fund all the core functions, and then we look at these requests. It's called Chapter 42F grants, because that's where it's based in the code. And there's an online application that people fill out before session starts, shortly after session begins. They fill out that form, they submit it to both the House and the Senate money committees. And there's very strict deadlines. It's part of the weeding out process. They meet the deadlines, they get their applications in, and then they go around asking the different senators, legislators to support. The Maui team does it a little bit different. We sit down, the three of us, and look at all of the GIAs for Maui County, and then we have one joint request going in, which I think helps Maui, and it also helps the people making decisions. They're saying, well, if the Maui group agrees on this, then it's a better chance of getting funding.
And we've actually done fairly well in recent years. I know that we funded the entire Maui campus for the Easter Seals, and they're in the middle of doing the renovations of the property on Wakea Avenue right now. And this year in the Senate budget, I believe we have at least some money right now for the work that the Cameron Center wants to do.
Right, and Cameron Center houses a number of nonprofits, and it helps the whole Maui County. And I'm very grateful to see that Lanai Community Health Center got some funding.
And Hana Health as well.
And Hana Health.
That, I think, gives you a sense of the kind of programs or projects that we try to fund. Things that have to do with social service organizations and the clientele that they service that maybe government doesn't provide a lot of programming for, or wants the programming done at the local level, like Easter Seals, Best Buddies, and some of those sorts of organizations. And then also health type organizations. We try to maintain our partnership with the federally qualified healthcare centers like the Lanai Community Health Center, Hana Health, and some of the others, because they really help to take care of the unserved or the underserved, and making sure that we have equal access to healthcare in our state.
But we are a little concerned this year because while we think we can probably push for capital projects, I think we're a little bit more unsure about whether or not we'll be able to get money for programmatic GIAs.
And there were a number of those that came in from all parts of Maui County, and all with very excellent programs. There was a wonderful economic literacy program that came in from Maui Economic Development Board, and we had programs for Maui Family Support and other kinds of programs that help with early learning and students getting a great start and students that are young people that are at risk. And those are ongoing programs that we have in the community, and the ask was to help either expand or shore up some of the cuts that had been made over the previous years. And I think we're all keeping our fingers crossed that we'll be able to provide some funding for those. But as we've all noted, that's going to be the last thing that gets agreed upon across the conference table for budget.
Another topic. Can we discuss what a resolution is? What is the difference between a resolution and a law, and some of the interesting resolutions moving through the legislature? We've never touched on resolutions either.
Okay, well, I guess that the simplest way to say it is that, a bill is law. A bill is has a force of law. A resolution expresses the sentiment of the body. So, like we do a law that says we're going to fund, the budget is a law that funds everything. But if we have a resolution that says we'd like, we'd like a Department of Health to do a task force on something, a resolution is asking them to please do that. It says the body would like you to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Most times, organizations and the different government bodies will comply. And sometimes they don't.
And then next time it becomes a bill
You've got
instead of
the
a
bill,
reso.
right? But that's a fundamental difference.
Well, and there's two kinds of resos too. There's the single body resolution, which would be a Senate resolution, and then if you really want to say get the auditor to do a sunrise study or get governmental agency to do something, it needs to be done by concurrent resolution. So it might start in the Senate and be a Senate concurrent resolution, but then it would have to go over and be passed by the House before it would have that force.
Like for example, we have a number of resolutions that have moved that say let's support the bid for Hawaii to host the Pacific Arts Festival in 2016. So that's the body saying, yes, we support this. Mm-hmm. We have others that say, let's support the Hokulea's voyage around the world. So it's a way of expressing the sentiment of the legislature.
And I think one of the more interesting ones is the Aloha Challenge program
Mm-hmm.
that really seeks to have all of us, county level, state level, and in our region, our Pacific region, undertake the task of creating sustainability in environment, in air and water, and other practices that will impact the environment.
And there are certain kinds of resolutions that actually do have the force of law.
Yes.
Like if there's a land transaction, for example, by the state government, the law now requires that the legislature has to give the final approval on it. So those resolutions have to pass in order for a land transaction involving the state to go forward.
Right, and that's a good point. Previously the way the law was that the legislature had to disapprove. And so many times things move so quickly that we didn't get to it. So that's why we changed it to say the legislature has to approve. So now every lease, every land transaction comes in the form of a resolution from the departments to the legislature for us to be the final body to say yes or no.
And typically, the process is the landowner will work with the land agent on the various islands, take it to the land board, and then it comes back to us for approval. So, it has all the meets and bounds, the tax map key, everything. But any time that any structure along the ocean, along the shoreline, needs to be repaired, you have to go and actually go through this process. So I know I've had a couple on Front Street and a few in Kihei that have had to work its way through this process, and it's all sometimes very anxious because resolutions are typically done towards the end of the legislative session, and they know that if we don't act on it, then they could get caught. So
And wait till next year.
it's something that I know the three of us when they're in our area, we really try to stay on top of it and make sure they move through the process.
Yeah, like this year we did a number for Lanai, Manele Harbor. We did a number for Front Street in Lahaina, Kihei. I think there was some on Molokai as well. So, we when they come through, we see if it's in our district and we follow them really closely.
If we could move on to another subject, the Hawaii State Senate has the sole authority to confirm the governor's appointments to the various state departments. Can we talk about some of the notable confirmations for the 2014 session? I know we did a lot of confirmations.
We did the Board of Regents today. And that's always an interesting process because the committee or the area that the Board and Commission is assigned to, that's the committee that has oversight on those. So our Committee on Higher Education did the first cut on reviewing the Board of Regents nominees, and then it comes to the floor. And we have, everything from directors to people that sit on the Public Accountancy Board, Dental Board, all of just a variety of different boards. And we have some interesting folks from our constituencies from Maui who serve on some of these boards, and so they will come in. If they're coming to my committee, usually I talk to them by the phone because we don't pay for people's weigh-in when they're coming in for board and commission confirmation, although when they serve, the agency that they're assigned to pays for their travel. So it makes it a little bit more equitable for folks on the neighbor islands to serve on some of these very important boards and commissions.
No, I was in the House originally, so this is something that's fairly new for me. And I am surprised by how seriously my colleagues take it. I always thought that advise and consent kind of means that the governor or whoever the appointing authority has been talking to the Senate, and so names have been exchanged and there's been some discussion beforehand, but that's not always the case. And the Senate actually has to do their own due diligence to take a look at the person's qualifications and whether or not they're really going to be able to do the job. And sometimes it's a matter of whether or not that person really is going to put in the time, because it's an honor to be appointed to these boards and commissions, but it's also a lot of work, and especially for our constituents from Maui. I mean, it used to be that they would try to hold some meetings on the neighbor islands. They don't do that anymore. So it means a lot of travel, and the state will only pay really for the plane ticket.
Right, or the cab fare down, but
Yeah.
it really is very important. All of our professions have licensing boards, and if the board doesn't do their due diligence, you could keep people from being a part of the profession, or you could not be protecting the public because you're letting people in that don't deserve to be licensed. So it's really that difficult balance. I think we have Board of Education nominees coming up. So it's the full gamut from motor vehicle repair to Board of Regents to Board of Education.
Boxing commission to
and everything in between.
homeopathy commission.
Yeah.
To,
Yeah, I think we've got the Tourism Authority next week,
Yes.
as well as the Water Commission and the Land Board coming up.
So you have a range, and they can be from 5 or 6 members, or we try to make them
Odd, yeah.
an uneven number. So say from 5 to 7 members to some of them could have 13 or 15 members.
But the thing of what's called advice and consent, which is in the Constitution, is really the check in the system. So the governor proposes the name, and we do the due diligence and say yes or no. And there's been times when we've said no to people. And we've looked at qualifications. We looked at for every nominee, we actually send them a questionnaire. We developed that a number of years ago because what we found is some nominees came down in the past and we said, well, do you know what you do? And they couldn't answer it. So, we have a questionnaire asking them, do you know what this commission does? Do you have the time to serve? What's your background? What do you want to do on this commission? What are your goals? It's to give us some basis to make a good decision.
And all of the testimony on nominees, as well as their questionnaires, can be found online. One of the boards that's coming up is the Hawaii Health Systems Corporation, and there's a Maui young man who's being appointed to that board, so he'll be coming around to talk story with us to let us know his interest in being on that board and what he brings to that board as well, his qualifications. And I think it gives everybody who may not know these individuals a little bit more objective rationale for why they should be voting yes on them.
Another topic we never really touched on before is floor presentations. The Senate honors numerous individuals and organizations on the chamber floor for their significant contributions to the state. Are there any particular floor presentations that had a lasting impression on you?
Well, let's start with what is a floor presentation.
Yeah. Yes,
Uh,
please.
You know, before we start session, each senator has the ability to honor a group or honor someone on the floor. And so we have a process of, making sure it's calendared and, we don't have conflicts, but we can bring people to the floor. And I think we've been very judicious about it by, making sure that the people we bring are at the top of their field and, the ones that truly deserve the honor. So like we've had recently with the Boys and Girls Club was recently here, and we had
The Youth of the Year just happened to be from
Maui, right?
Maui Youth of the Year.
Yeah, so we cover the gamut though. If you look at it, we've had everything from military to dance troops to
sports teams
Sports
that
teams.
win
oh,
honors.
Shane Victorino was on the
Right,
floor.
right.
You guys did Hokulea, I remember as
Yes.
well.
We
That
did,
was
and
Education Week just a few weeks ago.
right,
Education.
and we honor those small business owners like the Nobrega family that are recognized by the Small Business Administration for their service to community or being just an exemplary company. And so that was nice to have Maui Soda and Ice Works on the floor and recognized in that way. This year was the 50th anniversary of the Commission on the Status of Women, so we had all of the folks in, and the chair of the commission is currently Leslie Wilkins from Maui Economic Development Board. So.
And actually, we had an interesting one on opening day. We had
yes.
all the all the senators we could find, former senators from statehood until the present. We invited them back to come to opening day, and it was a very nice reunion to have. We had Avery Chumbley from Maui. Who else did we have?
Joe Tanaka came
Joe
out.
Tanaka. All the old guys came back. It was
Yeah, it was just us younger ones that were there.
Another presentation that the legislature does every year is the Hawaii Medal of Honor to honor fallen service members with ties to Hawaii. Would you like to give your thoughts on why this is such an important ceremony for the legislature?
Well, we've had some members of the Maui community who have been honored in this way because they've paid the ultimate sacrifice. And I think as the war started in Iraq and Afghanistan, and more folks with Hawaii ties were being called up, whether they were active duty at Joint Base Hickam or Marine Corps Base Kaneohe or our National Guard, it just felt right that we do something for the folks that were part of the families and friends that had their family members pay the ultimate sacrifice. And we were actually, I think, one of the first states that created the Medal of Honor. And it has such great symbolism. And I can just tell when we have family members accept that honor, that it means a lot to them. To have that recognition and to have an elected body and all of state government say, we appreciate what you did. We thank you for your service and your sacrifice.
I think it's a real reminder that there's a real cost involving real people in the conflicts that we're involved in, and the kind of sacrifice that the people we're honoring have done, and their families. And it's one of those days that's, if you're not touched,
Yeah.
then in a lot of ways you don't deserve to be where we are.
Yeah, I was pleased with this year's ceremony and the fact that it's only a few people.
Yes.
I remember when it first started, it was 40 and 50, a huge amount of people, and now this year it's just a handful, which means that, we're not losing as many people in the wars. And frankly, this is one ceremony that I like to see
Us not have to do.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, but I remember in the first years being struck by how young some of the folks who had lost their lives were. And I remember sitting in the House chamber next to representative who had a son that was about the same age of somebody that we had just presented the Medal of Honor to, and it was very, very, very difficult to sit through that.
That is a very moving ceremony, I must admit. Senators, we have a couple minutes left if you guys would like to say any last thoughts. We have about 3 minutes or so. I leave some closing words for you guys. I mean, that's
Well, you know, we're at the end of of the session. We have another month to go. And so this is where things, you know, the rubber hits the road and we start formulating the final bills. So, you know, now it's the Senate and the House in the discussion. But, you know, do continue to contact us. Do continue to let us know how you feel about the particular bills that are still out there. And realize that the conference is when it all really happens. So, you know, this is when we have to be creative in how we reach our compromises, reach the final bills. And I think the final thing is that all of us, you know, collectively, the three of us work very well together to make sure that all of Maui County is covered as best we can.
And this will be a time, certainly, when we're reaching out to our Maui colleagues across the way in the House, you know, from Speaker on down, to try to make sure that when these compromises are reached, when the budget is finally done, that not only do we do the best that we can for the state of Hawaii, but that any particular special interests that Maui has are taken care of as well.
And we are going to keep in mind what our fellow county officials have been telling us about certain things. We can't make any promises, but you know, we're going to be working hard to make sure that the budget that does pass reflects a lot of the priorities that the Maui community wants.
Yeah, because that's really why we're here. We're here to serve our constituents back home and to do the best that we can for the entire state. And I know that Maui County wants us to try to lift that cap on the transient accommodations tax, and we'd love to do that. We just don't know how the budget's going to shake out.
We're all very lucky to have you as legislators. Thank you very much for your time today. Thank you everyone for joining us on this episode of Maui Mana'o. Aloha and mahalo.